So welcome everyone. We're excited to see so many people here with us today. And I think Lauren and I are both really excited to talk about SGS902 and the winter offering of this course. So I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Carolyn McCrae. I work as an educational developer here in the Center for Teaching and Learning. And my focus as an ED here in the center is really on graduate student and postdoctoral fellow professional development as educators.
Carolyn, you've just cut out a little bit for me, but you're back. It seems to be back now. Just cut out at the end of your introduction there in terms of your role as an educational developer. So it all sounded great. My name, to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Lauren Anstey. I'm also an educational developer here within the center with a slightly different portfolio and focus than Carolyn, in that my focus or area of work is largely around curriculum. So curriculum and course design, and so that obviously has lots of connections. Both of our portfolios have lots of connections to the topics that we discuss when we talk about teaching and learning in higher education, which is the title, of course, of SGS 902. Carolyn, maybe I'll go ahead and advance to our next slide.
Sure, and please continue to let me know if there's any issues with my audio. I will figure it out as we go. So we wanted to start with a land acknowledgement, and I will say that I'm joining you today from Kingston, Ontario, and I'm a settler on this land that I now call my home, and where I work as well. And I invite you to think about where you are joining us from today, whether that be Kingston or elsewhere on Turtle Island or around the world, and to think about what land you are on and what your relationship and responsibilities are to that land. Queen's University, where we are kind of virtually joining today, is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. And I think part of my work in giving land acknowledgements, and I think part of why I choose to do land acknowledgements on sessions like this, is to think about and reaffirm my commitment to the calls to action as part of the TRC, and thinking about my role as an educator and as an educational developer and what it means in my role to help others in terms of decolonization and my own work on decolonization of our practice as educators. All right, so what are we going to talk about in the session today? So our session today has a few kind of key topics. So we're going to start with what SGS 902 is all about. So what is this course, and what are the goals of the course? And then we'll focus in on what the structure is specifically for this winter 2022 iteration. We will talk about the assignments, the schedule, the workload, and what kind of those expectations are for the course. And then lastly, if you're interested, and we hope most of you are, how you would go about registering for this particular iteration of the course.
And we do have some slides to help structure some of that conversation, but we also definitely welcome your questions. Feel free to note those in the chat, maybe as we go through, and just noting that we've reserved a fair amount of time towards the end after we've kind of talked about this, because I'm sure questions will be answered as we go through. Feel free to note your questions in the chat as we go so that we can keep track of those, and then we will dedicate that end portion of our time together, the latter half, really, making sure that we answer any questions that are left outstanding.
All right, so what is SGS 902 about? So SGS 902, I'm sure many of you who are joining us today might already have some understanding of the course, but this is a 4-credit course offered through the Center for Teaching and Learning. And it's a course open to all graduate students from disciplines from across campus, as well as postdoctoral fellows. And this course is really intended for grad students and postdocs to start thinking about their roles as educators and have a kind of practice and evidence-based inquiry into what teaching and learning looks like for them. And so it's for those who want to develop as skilled, thoughtful, and confident post-secondary teachers. And the goal of the course is to challenge and broaden conceptions of learning and approaches to teaching. And I think something to note here is that SGS 902 is a fairly interactive course. It's heavily based on our discussions and learning from each other, regardless of what disciplines we all come from. So these are some of the topics that we will be discussing as part of SGS 902. So some of these are kind of our weekly focuses, but some of these are also topics that you'll see woven through the entire course. So for example, guiding principles of teaching and learning, what is scholarly teaching or to be engaged in scholarship of teaching, course design, active and experiential pedagogies, assessment and grading, decolonization and reconciliation, anti-racism, and online teaching and with teaching with technologies.
That's a great point, Carolyn, that these are both topics, weekly topics, and then threads, because as well, as we head into talking about assignments, you'll see how some of these course topics are also areas of practice through the assignments that are a part of the course.
All right, so this is going to be the messy piece. And I start by saying that in the slide is titled Proposed Blended Hybrid Model, because really the way that this iteration of the course will look like in January is based on who we have enrolled in the course and kind of what structure works with everyone. So we're proposing a blended hybrid model, and a blended model meaning that we are going to have some elements of synchronous time, and that's synchronous time together on Wednesday mornings. That's when the course is timetabled. And there will also be asynchronous components of the course. And so these might be videos, these might be other online tasks that we're asking folks to engage in. And together, the synchronous and asynchronous pieces come together as the course time. Now, the second part of this blended hybrid model is the hybrid piece. So blended means we're doing things in both ways, synchronous and asynchronous. The hybrid means there are two ways that we're hosting the synchronous piece. So our synchronous time together might be in person, physically in a classroom, or it might be online. Folks joining us like you are today as part of a Zoom call. And really, this proposed blended hybrid model is so that as many students who want to take SGS 902, we as instructors can facilitate how we're all going to engage together at the same time, regardless of where you are, whether you're physically in Kingston, whether your program is a remote program that you're not here, and how this is all going to come together. And so I think I wrote a note to myself that this is a bit unusual. Like, I think when we talk about this as being a proposed model, it's really because we're coming back from a year of remote teaching, and there's been a lot of our shift back to on-campus teaching, but we're in kind of this period of flux where Lauren and I have engaged in numerous conversations of being accommodating to as many students as we can. And so this could change, and that this is our way of trying to adapt to everyone's needs as students and as instructors.
For sure. And I think the biggest part of the proposal or the change that may be adjusted based on the cohort that comes together and their needs and interests is really around the hybrid piece, whether or not we are going to be fully online or whether we definitely will have that in-person component. What is sure is that is the blended piece. So having synchronous times that happen Wednesday mornings, and then having asynchronous activities that complement what you're doing in class in a group setting that you will receive guidance on largely through OnQ. That's more established and set. It's just that hybrid piece that we will continue to adjust as COVID parameters and your own needs inform that.
So this visualization is really what we expect the course structure to look like for a week in the life of a student in SGS 902. So the start of the week is the initial kind of prep or reading, where you're going to engage in some foundational concepts through some readings that are assigned or some other online activities. It might be a video. And then Wednesday mornings we'll come together to connect in our synchronous session. So whether that's in person or online, we'll have our synchronous time between 9:30 and 11:30 or 9:30 and 12:30. Some weeks will be a 2-hour synchronous session, and some hours we will need a full 3-hour synchronous session. It will really depend on the activities and what we were doing in that particular week. And this is our time for discussion and to connect with groups, your peers, and with the instructor. And then the kind of latter half of this is we really want to do some application of what we're learning. And so the last part of the week, or the last hours associated with this course, will really be about you applying through either independent work or group work, the kind of theory that we present in the first part of the week into some sort of task or an assignment maybe that's due that week or that's ongoing throughout the course. And so in the hopes that, well, not in the hopes, but if we come together in person physically, we will be in an active learning classroom. We're going to be in Ellis Hall. And this is an active learning classroom in the sense that it will be able to accommodate our kind of hybrid model if we have folks in person in class and we have folks joining by Zoom. So this will be the physical space that we may be joining in January.
And I think an important note here too as well is that you can even see by the picture just how large this space is. Given our enrollment size, we actually anticipate quite a bit of space if we are in this in-person classroom to be able to socially distance as is comfortable and give lots of space to be able to move around and not get in each other's way. So we wanted to give you a bit of an overview of the big assignments so that you have a sense as to the structure of the course in that sense. And so I'm just going to give high-level overviews. We do have a draft syllabus that we would be happy to share that you could read about these assignments further. And so the major assignments are first that through the course you will draft a teaching philosophy statement and have opportunities to be refining and talking about that philosophy as you're expressing your own beliefs about teaching and learning and how that transpires into your classroom practices or even as you're starting into your teaching, how that comes through in some of your work. The second assignment is, again, guided through different activities of the course to use a syllabus that you have found that's close to your disciplinary area of interest or possibly the areas in which you imagine yourself to be teaching, and take that syllabus as a tool or as one particular case to look at very closely. So how do we notice elements of, say, learning outcomes and assignments being represented in that syllabus? And what can we tell from that about teaching and learning? Another component, and I've lumped these two assignments together here, there's a micro-teaching component and a teaching practicum. So of course, as important as it is to talk about teaching and to think about our philosophy, there's also the practice element, because teaching takes that practice and practice over time. So the micro-teaching is a part of the course where it's a 10-minute teach. It's very short, that you teach in small groups to one another, and then there's feedback on those 10 minutes. That actually happens towards the latter end of the course, once you've had a chance to maybe think through teaching and practice talking about different elements of the course with your peers. And the teaching identify discipline. You would engage in an inquiry that we will explore what teaching and learning really looks like in the discipline. So I mentioned that, wanting to go into a little bit more detail about the practicum, because it's often an area about the course that we get lots of questions. And it's also something that if you're definitely keen on teaching the course, you can maybe start thinking about, and not that you have to put anything, solidly in place before January, but it is helpful sometimes for folks to start thinking about what this could look like for themselves. So the practicum is a teaching opportunity. At minimum, it's an hour-long teaching event, whether that's a lecture or a laboratory or a context that really fits with what you kind of have available to you as a real scenario of teaching that class, whatever that is, and peers from this course join you in observing that teaching event. And last year, because we were very much remote, this was all facilitated online. So for example, peers would join the Zoom link where you were teaching, where someone else was teaching a class. They are there to observe. So they have some guidance as to what they're looking for and how to take some notes to provide you with feedback. You obviously do the same for your other peers within the class. And that is all culminated in a reflection that we just have you stop and pause and say, how did that go? What kind of feedback did you get from your peers and what did you learn from it? So we mention it here because it's something that, again, if you're keen on taking, you're definitely decided on enrollment, you could start to think of what that teaching opportunity could be. And we offer lots of guidance to help. Because there's oftentimes people who say, I'm not really sure how to make this happen for myself, but definitely if you're TAing in the winter term, that makes it almost easy, or there's an opportunity there often, or there's other ways in which you might approach your supervisor or others to ask for those guest teaching opportunities. So I see lots of really great questions coming in the chat. That's great. I just wanted to acknowledge that they're there, and we will make sure that we're working through those to address them towards the end. Again, because this, I can sort of generally speak to what constitutes a pass. This is a pass-fail course. So it gets noted on your transcript as a pass, as opposed to a letter or numeric grade. Though we have a fairly robust way of determining what a pass looks like in the course. And it is to those, a pass is really to regularly attend the synchronous sessions and to successfully complete all course assignments. And what completion of assignments can look like ranges. So it could just be that you are completing and submitting the related work, that you demonstrate regular engagement. So for example, in the group assignment, you are working through that with your group and you achieve the presentation, which is the final output. You've successfully completed that assignment. There are one or two places where you are submitting work that the instructor, and there are rubrics assigned with that to help us give you the feedback, and we do evaluate that on a pass threshold of 70% or greater. But I will say, to emphasize the point, that we provide lots of feedback, lots of support, that this is very infrequently an issue for students, that they are often quite successful on the assignments and in the course in general. But I think you've probably picked up from what we have been expressing about the course that this, as Carolyn mentioned in the very beginning, this is a very active, engaged course that we do look to model a lot of really great practices in teaching and learning. And so there is the expectation that students are coming ready to participate, to collaborate with their peers at times of connection and discussion, to approach these ready to go and having done some of the pre-work that's necessary for making that in-class time really valuable. That's why we've reserved some of the activities for in-class, because that's when it's best to come together. And of course, to voice your input, concerns, ideas to us, because we really recognize that you have a lot of autonomy over your learning, and we seek to support you in your engagement through the course. And a lot of that comes down to hearing how it's going for you and how we can work with you. So, in terms of what we really strive for and work for in the course is to facilitate something that does prioritize your learning and well-being. We prioritize communication and make sure that that's coming to you clearly and regularly, and to make judicial use of learning technologies, because of course the technology is only so great as our use and application of it. And certainly in terms of maybe there is a relation to some of the topics, but it's important to us as well that we continue to reflect on what it means to decolonize our own perspectives, our own teaching, and to think of that very broadly and inclusively in terms of what it means to teach a course that is accessible and welcoming to everyone. And that includes facilitating oftentimes challenging conversations around what it means to bring decolonizing and anti-racist practices into the classroom. I noticed there was a comment about the workload, and I think this might help address some of that. So as you heard Carolyn say, the in-class sessions are 2 to 3 hours. There's a couple of occurrences specifically towards the end of the term. So this is week 12 and week 13, where we do require 3 hours of time. However, for the remainder of the in-class sessions, they are limited to 2 hours. And about the same for prep and apply work the asynchronous work that you would be doing outside of the Wednesday morning sessions, that you could expect about 2, sometimes 3 hours, though we're really trying to be careful to balance out the demands of the course.
And Lauren, I'm just going to jump in here and say that I think part of that big kind of range and time commitment that was noted in the question in the chat might also come from like when your practicum fits into this, because that teaching experience, that practicum that you're going to kind of engage in might happen throughout this piece, and that your preparation and kind of what goes into your teaching session will add on to that kind of prep or apply time whenever your practicum fits within this.
And maybe another way to look at is this view here. So what this is essentially a table of January, February, March, and April, the 4 months of the course across the top. And then each of the assignments, the philosophy, the inquiry, annotated syllabus, micro-teaching, and practicum down the side. And when certain assignments are prioritized in the course. So you can sort of see the overall spread that the teaching elements happen earlier on in the term, with final elements happening in April. The annotated syllabus and the micro-teaching, however, are more heavily weighted on March. And the practicum, like Carolyn was just saying, there is a bit of, there's flexibility certainly as to when you need to be able to, you are doing that. But ultimately the self-evaluation is due by the end of the course. Finally, we're going to send this back out to you in a follow-up email, but just a quick note as to how to register. So it does require the completion of the academic change form from the registrar's office that your supervisor signs, and then we sign. And so we do require that get filled out and sent to the Center for Teaching and Learning at queensu.ca. Postdocs, it's completing that academic change form for formal registration through through the registrar. What we're doing there is collecting your information and making sure that you get added to the OnQ site. And at the time of registration, we will be asking you to consider what your preference is, so that we can start to get that better sense as to what the needs are of this cohort.